Hello everyone, it's Wednesday and you're watching Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. North Korea tried to launch another spy satellite last Thursday only to fail. The regime said the first and second stage flights of the launch operated successfully, which contradicts what South Korea's defense ministry says. Pyongyang said the next launch will come in October, and many experts expect that to be around the founding of its ruling Workers' Party on October 10th. Meanwhile, North Korea apparently decided to reopen its borders after more than 3 years, though it is a limited reopening as it only approved the return of its nationals abroad. When will foreigners be allowed back in? For an in-depth analysis of the latest events in North Korea, we invite Doctor Go Myong-hyun, Senior Fellow at the Asan Institute for Policy Studies. Dr. Go, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
And we also have Mark Berry, Associate Editor Emeritus at the International Journal on World Peace. Good to see you, Mr. Berry.
Good evening.
Good evening. Now, let's start with the most recent news. Dr. Go. So, North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un visited the Navy Command, and there he called the leaders of South Korea, the U.S., and Japan as gang bosses, right? In an apparent criticism of their very first standalone trilateral summit. How did you see such remarks?
So I think in addition to calling the leaders of three countries' names, Kim Jong-un also called South Korea as the Republic of Korea, the official name of the country, which is not the usual expression that North Korean leaders use when it comes to South Korea, because this is actually very much intended. It's very intentional on the part of the leaders of North Korea, because they don't use the official name of South Korea because they want to portray the relationship they have with South Korea as a special inter-Korean relations. So the calling names to the leaders of the three countries, Korea, Japan, and the United States, is par for the course for the North Korean leaders. But then I think the calling of South Korea with the official name, by its official name, is a change of, I guess, an approach by the North Koreans that echoes what the Kim Yo-jong, Kim Jong-un's sister, did a couple of months ago, and she also addressed South Korea by calling it with its official name, the Republic of Korea. So I think Kim Jong-un, in addition to threatening or complaining about the ongoing joint military drills between Korea and the United States, as well as the holding of the trilateral summit in Camp David, Kim Jong-un wants to raise the rhetorical heat in the Korean Peninsula by alluding to the fact that North Korea could reconsider its approach to South Korea, which means that it might not use the prism of inter-Korean relations, which are special relations, and they switch it to more of a normal country-to-country relations, which could make North Korea's threat of using nuclear weapons preemptively more credible.
Right. It's interesting how calling South Korea as its official name was also a noticeable part. Now, Mr. Berry, let's move on to talk about North Korea's recent attempt to launch the spy satellite. So we are going to talk about its failure, but before that, what can we talk about the timing of the launch?
Well, they had announced really just before they launched, a day or two before, that their window for launching would be between August 24th and the 31st. So the first thing you say is, well, gee, that's exactly the same timing as the Ulchi Freedom Shield exercises. So there's no coincidence there. But I think even more importantly, because of the potential national significance, if they could have successfully launched a satellite, is the fact that on September 9th, the DPRK is celebrating the 75th anniversary of its national or state founding. So I think the lead up to that is even more important than registering during the Ulchi Freedom Shield exercises their discomfort and disagreement with the exercises. So I think it really kind of it's juxtaposed on both the exercises and the September 9th anniversary.
Right, I see your point. Now, Dr. Go, Pyongyang said the rocket's first and second stages operated successfully and that the error occurred at a later stage of the flight. But South Korea's defense ministry said that there are grounds to believe that the space launch vehicle had an abnormal flight from the second stage engine. How do you see such contradictory remarks?
So I would actually give more, I think I find the South Korean's observation more credible than the North Korean statement, partly because the trajectory of the missile or the space vehicle is towards the the South. So it means that the South Koreans have a much better vantage point to observe the trajectory of the space vehicle and whether there's a failure or not. So there's more information on the South Korean side. It's also more accurate. But I think the reason why North Koreans claim that the fault or the error lied with the third stage rather than the second stage, which is claimed by South Korea, is that they want to, I think, avoid the impression that they haven't been able to solve a fundamental or structural problem that this particular space vehicle, the Cheolima-1, has. So it's understood that the reason why the Cheolima-1's earlier attempt failed was because of the failure with the second stage. And if the South Korean authorities are correct, North Koreans also registered another failure with the second stage, indicating that the North Koreans haven't been able to solve the technical problem that has existed ever since they first tried to test the Cheolima-1. So there are all these talks and speculations that the North Koreans are launching Cheolima-1 in a very short span of time, despite the fact that they seem to have very serious problem with their missile. And then the speculation is that the reason why they have this accelerated testing schedule with the Cheolima-1 is because of the political calendar that we see right now unfolding. For instance, the latest launch coincided with the September 9th the Foundation of the Republic Day. And the upcoming announced launch will coincide with the October 10th Foundation of the Party Day. So I think for some reason, North Koreans are not following a technical calendar or schedule. They are rather following a political calendar without being able to solve their technical problem, which means that the next announced upcoming test might also end in failure.
Right, I see. Now, Mr. Berry, though the regime relatively quickly announced the failure of the launch through its foreign-targeted state-run media, there has been no coverage of the related news in domestic media that North Korean citizens can access. Why not tell its own people?
Well, they did have a small mention on KCNA, and obviously that's more oriented towards the outside world. But I don't think it means that nobody has access to KCNA within North Korea. So I don't think it's being kept as a state secret that the second satellite launch was a failure. But obviously the fact that if indeed it is not run as of today in Nodong Shinmun or on Korean Central Television, then yes, indeed, they're keeping it from the population overall, although the highest echelons surely know. But it just means that why play up something that's not a success? And they have no obligation to. And I'm sure Kim Jong-un, much like many other comparable regimes, sees no need to announce to the population anything that is not in his best interest for them to know. And I think it's as simple as that. And that pattern will likely continue because everything is sort of a zero sum. It's either an outstanding success or proclaimed as an outstanding success, or they don't mention it at all to their own people. So this is really, daily life in North Korea.
Right, so there is no need to tell its own people because it was not successful. All right, Dr. Go, North Korea announced that its next launch is going to be in October, and many experts are already saying that it is going to be around October 10th, right? What is special about that day?
Well, this year's October 10th marks the 78th anniversary of the foundation of the North Korea's Workers' Party. So it's a major anniversary for the North Koreans, and in the past, this particular day coincided with the unveiling of significant weapon systems. For instance, the Hwasong-15 ICBMs, as well as other missile systems that North Koreans have developed so far. So, anyways, our eyes are on that day because we are expecting North Koreans to mount a parade again, and then maybe they're going to unveil something new. But on the other hand, I think North Koreans also need to have a cause for celebration. The last couple of years has been especially tough in the North Korean economy, and especially for Kim Jong-un. Kim Jong-un has been showing signs that he's very stressed and under pressure to deliver something to the people of North Korea. And this in fact reflects the economic crisis that the country is subject to, and especially the people are suffering from it. But then the interesting thing is that much of the reason why the North Koreans are suffering from an economic crisis is because of Kim Jong-un's own choices made back in 2021 at the 8th Party Congress, which marked the total shift in economic policy for North Korea. If before 2021, North Koreans had chosen to coexist with the market, with the underground economy, give some agency to the people of North Korea. After 2021, Kim Jong-un announced a policy of economic re-centralization, which essentially banned the market system in North Korea. And I think the banning of the market in North Korea has a lot to do with the shortfall in economic outputs, especially in food production, which is causing starvation in some parts of the country. So I think Kim Jong-un knows that the economic policies are not working, and the people in North Korea, besides him, has not much to celebrate. So I think that creates a pressure, not just on Kim Jong-un, but also his advisors to deliver a success. And what's interesting is that North Korea has been quite successful when it comes to weapons development. This is also part of the weapons development roadmap that the party had announced back in 2021. So they've been quite successful with the weapons development, as we know. And I think that's why Kim Jong-un is putting all his hope in the success of the upcoming space vehicle test.
Right, I see. Well, we are going to shift our gears to reopening, but before that, Dr. Go, it seems like, as you have already said, Pyongyang is in a rush to make this satellite launch quite successful. But if Kim Jong-un needs something to deliver to his people, why does he, keep why is he wanting to launch this space satellite? I mean, could there be?
He has another choice. He has another choice. I think that he has other, for instance, other ways to showcase success. So this could be still an option for the North Koreans if they carry out the Chalima test again, and if they fail, which is quite probable. Then North Koreans might decide to carry out the test of an ICBM that they already have deployed. So that's an option, and they could even carry out a nuclear test. But this doesn't really go with the jive, with the tone of the Party Foundation Day, which is more celebratory, whereas the nuclear test is more threatening to the outside world. So I think that's why, we are hoping that in a way that the North Koreans fail with the space vehicle test, but at the same time, the failure doesn't change or provoke them in a way or make them angry that could result in the testing of another nuclear device.
Right, I see. Now, Mr. Barry, North Korea decided to reopen its border on Sunday after more than 3 years of tight virus curves. However, given that Pyongyang only approved the return of its nationals abroad, it is seen as a limited border reopening. Who are these people that are returning home?
Before I answer your question, I just want to add to what Dr. Go said. Ankit Panda, one of the best missile analysts in the United States with the Carnegie Endowment, when the attempt was made to launch the satellite on August 24th, the first thing he tweeted was 3 words: space is hard. In other words, they're attempting to do almost the impossible given their technological ability and how they work. To answer your question, this is a very unusual situation because I don't recall North Korea being as shut down and closed down as it has been since the pandemic began in early 2020 at any other time in its 75-year history. So you can bet your bottom dollar that everybody returning, and I think initially you're going to see people who are working abroad, your restaurant workers. There was several busloads totaling about 700 people reportedly who returned to North Korea the other day. Those people are going to go through, I don't want to call it re-education programs, but they're going to get a welcome home, and here are the several weeks of workshops and lectures we're going to give you to kind of tighten up their ideological strength. Also, this will enable diplomats to return. But actually, it's a two-way thing because it also signals that some people who normally would more freely be able to travel outside of North Korea, in particular North Korean officials, will now be able to do so. And what I'm getting at is that it used to be that in Beijing, senior North Korean officials, under the guise of being trading agents, would regularly fly out to Beijing, but actually they were affiliated with the office of, let's say, Kim Jong-il at the time, back in, let's say, 2005. So there's not been that opportunity for these authoritative representatives of the office of today, Kim Jong-un, to go to Beijing and meet any counterparts, whether they be from the United States or representing European Union countries or anyone else. So what I look forward to is the fact that some of these people who just simply couldn't do their normal activities will be able to fly out to Beijing, Vladivostok, and by the way, of course, the commercial airline routes have sort of resumed to both Beijing and Vladivostok. So the beginnings of quiet contact and dialogue that couldn't really begin in the ways that they might have in the past, or in fact did in the past, going back to the early 1990s, will have the opportunity to begin as some of these North Korean officials, some of whom are very closely affiliated with Kim Jong-un's office, have a chance to finally go to their normal stomping grounds, such as Beijing and elsewhere, particularly in the socialist world. But as far as the ability of diplomats who are currently based in Pyongyang to leave, or those who were forced to return back home, such as to Moscow, and be able to return back, I could see that happening in coming months as well.
Right, I see. Now, Dr. Go, many say the reason behind such a decision to reopen its borders are economic difficulties. Do you agree?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think it's our time for North Korea to reopen its borders. Obviously, there are this pent-up need for the North Koreans who are based abroad to return home. For instance, North Korean diplomats haven't been able to come home for many years. But then also there are strong economic incentives for North Korea to reopen the borders, because part of the reason why the North Korean economy is undergoing crisis, it's not just because they're not able to generate money, it's also because of a lack of essential items, and then such as food items or household items and so forth, which they mostly rely on the outside, and except for some part of the food items. So they need to re-import stuff from the outside, but then so far North Korea had a very strong quarantine measures. So sometimes the import of essential items were delayed at the border, at the quarantine centers, for more than 3 months or 6 months even. So this situation will be resolved if the borders are reopened. But another essential activity for the North Koreans is clearly the activities to generate foreign currency income. So tourism is exactly a kind of important source of revenue for the North Koreans. And before the pandemic, Kim Jong-un had invested a lot in infrastructure, in the tourism infrastructure in North Korea, such as the Wonsan Galma International Tourism Resort. I think that's the name, how they call it. That's near Wonsan. And the reason why he developed this mega tourism project was to attract the Chinese tourists. So with China adopting a with COVID policy, and which normalizes the public health measures that have been in place so many years, and North Korea reopening its borders, it really increases the chance, the tantalizing prospect of North Koreans being able to host Chinese tourists, which incidentally it's one of the ways to bypass sanctions that are currently in place against North Korea. So I think this is a reason why North Koreans are trying to normalize the COVID situation in the country, because there are clearly economic payoffs that they can expect from it.
Then could we say this reopening of its borders rather proves the economic difficulties this regime is going through?
North Korea has been going through economic crisis ever since it was founded in a way. But then I think there are clearly more pressure on North Korea to renormalize the economy as soon as possible.
Right, I see. Now, Mr. Berry, some are expressing concerns that North Korean defectors in China could be forcibly repatriated to the north. How do you see this possibility, and is there any way to prevent that from happening?
I think it will happen. There's a standing agreement, understanding between China and North Korea. China doesn't want them anyway, but it's also leverage for China, because they maybe in segments, they will return those people that are already being held in some sort of detention. But then it's leverage for China and saying, look, we returned all of these escapees back to you. You can do with them what you feel is appropriate. But in return, we don't want to see a seventh nuclear test or whatever is the quid pro quo that China will seek. But unfortunately, to answer your question, I don't think there's any way to see these people being prevented, no matter how much the UN and its human rights agencies may protest. It's a bilateral issue, and China will not change the policy that it has carried out over the past several decades.
I see your point. Well, Dr. Go, so for now, it's being viewed as a limited border reopening. But when do you expect foreigners will be able to enter?
So there are signs that the North Koreans might be receiving back the foreign diplomats. You originally were posted to the country before, but who left the country because of the COVID quarantine measures. The signal for that is the return of the North Koreans' own diplomats. So the expectation is that after the Guangzhou Asian Games wraps up in September, North Korea might allow these diplomats to come back. But then obviously for the country to be fully open, I think there are other necessary conditions. And I think that could be, in fact, normalization of security situation in the Korean Peninsula, as well as the economic situation inside the country, because North Koreans have a lot of incentive to hide what's going on. For instance, this probably precludes the return of the international aid groups back into the country. So chances that we are going to see a very prolonged, slow process of North Korea reopening the borders, receiving very selected group of people, such as diplomats, but then for the country to be fully open, I mean, it never been fully open, obviously, but to receive back like essential personnel, such as international organization personnel, as well as the international aid groups, I think that's going to take a much longer time.
Right, I see your point. Now, Mr. Barry, with the reopening, it has become highly likely that North Korea will send a group of athletes to participate in the Asian Games being held in Hangzhou, China. How do you see the possibility of Pyongyang participating in the Games?
I think it's highly likely. I mean, in the United States, we don't think very much about the Asian Games because it's not part of our hemisphere. And if we even have a Pan-American Games, most Americans are not aware of it. But there is something called the Olympics. And so I think what North Korea is aiming at is they want to take advantage of a slow reopening, as so aptly described by Dr. Go, so that they can participate in the Paris Olympics. I don't think there'll be a unified team, as there was in 2018. But the reason they participated in the Jakarta Asian Games in 2018 was because that was at the high point of ROK-DPRK relations, and just a couple weeks before President Moon had gone to Pyongyang to meet with Kim Jong-un and give various talks and so forth. That was a high point of the relationship. But I think at this point, at least on the world stage, North Korea wants to be seen as normalizing its give and take with the outside world, albeit with stronger missile capability and military capability. But I will say this as a conclusion: North Korea is known over its 75-year history to go through cycles, and you can't change its behavior when it's in a certain part of its trajectory of either going up or coming down from a certain high point in its cycle. So perhaps what we're seeing is not only the beginning of an opening, but the beginning of, as we head towards 2024, of North Korea being a little bit more open to give and take with the rest of the world, but from what it believes is a stronger position of strength. And at the same time, it will see what happens in the United States in 2024, particularly in the fall, and particularly how its mentors and backers, China and Russia, also react to that. So a lot awaits us in the coming 14 months.
All right, I see. We'll have to wait and see. Now, unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition. Thank you, Mr. Barry and Dr. Go, for your time and insights. We really appreciate it. All right, that's all for Within the Frame tonight. We'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth stories. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.